Okay, so I've already factored out the a's, right? Because they were a common factor in all three terms. So I put the a on the outside. I divided everything by a, and then I got rid of the a's by doing that, and then I put the a on the outside. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor what's inside the parentheses, and I'm going to start by putting my parentheses here. A, parentheses, parentheses. Okay? Now I'm going to start off by writing all the factors of 8. I think it's just 8 and 1 and 2 and 4. And then all the factors of 3 are, it's easy. It's just 1. 3 is a prime number, so only 3 and 1 are factors. Now, I'm trying to decide what I'm going to put in my first term. Okay? And this is going to require me to do a little trial and error. So I'm going to start off by the first term is the factor of 8x squared. Okay, so I already figured out that 8 has two factors. So either these are the two numbers that are going to go in the first place in the parentheses, or these are the two numbers that are going to go in the first place in the parentheses. I'm going to start off with 4 and 2. 4x and 2x. Because when I multiply those together, I get 8x squared, right? So those are the factors of 8x squared. And then I know for sure that the terms that are going to go in the second place of the parentheses are going to be 3 and 1. But I don't know if the 3 is going to go here or the 1 is going to go here. Okay? Or the 3 here and the 1 here. So let me test. How do I know? How do I find out what's going to go where? Well, my goal is to get this middle term here. My goal is to get negative 2x. That's my goal. So to see if this will give me negative 2x, I multiply the outer terms together, and I multiply the inner terms together. Okay, so 4x times 1 is 4x, and 3 times 2x is 6x. So 4x and 6x. Now, when I add those or subtract those, do I get 2x? Yeah. I got lucky this time. I got it on the first try. I got the middle term in my first try using the first set of numbers that I tried. That happened by luck. Okay. Sometimes you've got to try like 20 different times before you get the right set of numbers. And I got it the first time, so it's awesome. Okay. So now all I've got to do is decide which one's going to be positive and which one's going to be negative. Well, remember I told you that when you have a negative third term, you know that your signs are going to be different. So the signs in the middle are going to be different. One's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. Now, I've got a middle negative term. So I know that the bigger number has to be negative. So what's bigger, 4x or 6x? What's bigger, 4x or 6x? I got 4x when I multiply the outer terms, and I got 6x when I multiply the inner terms. So the inner terms are bigger. So I'm going to put the negative here because negative 3 times 2x gives me a negative 6x. And I'm going to put the positive out here because the bigger term, the smaller term is positive and the bigger term is negative. Okay? And I know that the bigger term is negative, again, because the middle term is negative. If the middle term would have been positive, then I would have made the 6x positive and the 4x negative. Okay, I hope you understand. Okay, this looks like a perfect square to me. And what that means is that to find my answer, to find my factor, all I've got to do is square root both of these. It's actually the difference of squares. When there's a negative between two terms and both of the terms can be square rooted, it's called the difference of squares. So what's the square root of 4 squared? 4 y to the 4th, forgive me. What's the square root of y to the 4th? The square root of y to the 4th is y to the 2nd. So that's going to be my first term, y to the 2nd. And what's the square root of 25? 5. So that's going to be my second term, 5. And my terms that go here are going to be positive and negative because the last term, or the last term is negative. So whenever the last term is negative, my signs are always different. Whoops. So that's my answer. Y squared plus 5, y squared minus 5. Okay, now maybe you still don't understand factoring. What we're doing is we're thinking of two terms that when we multiply them together give us this. That's what factoring is. When I factor 8, I'm thinking of all the numbers or all the terms that will give me 8 when I multiply them together. 4 times 2, 8 times 1, those are factors of 8. That's what we're doing here. We're thinking of two terms that when we multiply them together, and that's what parentheses means, will give us this here. So when they asked us to factor something, like when they asked us to factor this, they asked us find the numbers or terms that when you multiply them together take you back to this. That's what factoring is. So if I tell you factor 12, 12 has a bunch of factors. It has first 12 times 1, that's a factor. Then 4 times 3, that's a factor. And then 6 times 2, that's a factor. And I think those are all the factors of 12. So what they're asking me when they ask me to factor 12 is find all the numbers that when you multiply them together give you 12. And that's what we did. The only two things that when you multiply them together that give you y to the 4th minus 25 are y squared plus 5 times y squared minus 5. Okay, hope that it helps you a little bit. Okay, now look, it looks like this one here is a perfect square. That means that to get my factor, all I've got to do is factor the first term and the third term. Now, there's the difference of squares, and then there's perfect squares. This looks like a perfect square. Let's find out if it is. So the square root of b fourth is b second. So that's going to be my first term. And the square root of my last term is x, because the square root of x squared is x. Okay, and since everything's positive, I know all my terms are positive. Now let me check it. Let's see if when I multiply the inner term and the outer terms, if I get 2b squared x. Let's see. X times b squared is b squared x, and b squared times x is b squared x, and when I add them, I get 2b squared x. So it's right. So this is my answer, b plus x times b squared plus x times b squared plus x. And another way of writing that is like this, b squared plus x squared, because this means, this little number here means that I'm going to multiply this times itself twice, which is what I'm doing here. So this would be a shorter way of writing my answer here. Okay. Again, it looks like this one's a difference of squares because the 4 can be square rooted, the a squared can be square rooted, and the 1 can be square rooted. So we're going to do square root of 4a squared and the square root of 1. Square root of 4a squared is 2a, and the square root of 1 is positive 1 and negative 1. Right? The square root of 1 is 1, so and since it's negative, it's the difference of squares, so I know that these have to be different. Okay? Remember, the last term is negative, so that means that the signs have to be different.